Hello, hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. I am so excited to be here with the fabulous Kerri Keegan and our amazing guest, Kerri Cust. I hope I said that correctly. So this is the Still Human podcast. Kerri Keegan and I started this because we wanted to talk about the things nobody talked about when we were in the big mastermind groups. And we wanted to have a comedic look at coaching and being an entrepreneur and frankly, life. We were like, what if we can make it more fun? So welcome, welcome. If you're just joining us, we're so glad you're here. If you're coming back, we're so glad you're here. And I am just delighted to have Kathy and Kerri with us today. So hi, ladies. Welcome.
Hello. Hola. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Kathy and I met a couple years ago, and then this organically bubbled up. And I have to say, I met Kerri about a year ago doing some virtual networking. And the minute she said what she talked about, I was like, oh my God. Like it just something like ding, 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 ding in my head. I was like, I have to talk to this lady. And then when I told Kathy what she did, she was like, are you kidding? And I said, oh my God, she'll be great for the podcast. So I feel like, Kerri, if you don't mind, can you introduce yourself? Because I feel like I'm going to mess it up. I don't know. You do so many cool things, but I would love to say in your own words what you do, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course. So I'm Kerri Cust. So I'm a self-love and intimacy coach. So I work with women and couples, and some men kind of pop in there as well sometimes.
Ooh.
And people work with me, yes, to get the spark back, that aliveness, that oomph in their life. So with women, it's like feeling desirable and juicy in your own body. Couples, it's like coming back to being like lovers again, passionate lovers, and reigniting that spark. So that's like looking at a relationship with pleasure and sexuality and speaking our needs and really coming into the fullness of who we are. Because from my own experience, when I have, I'm all about like doing your work and getting in the mud and all that stuff. But what has really shifted for me is really learning through pleasure and through joy. That is what has really ignited things for me or opened me up on my own journey. So I'm like, well, that's a good path to go on. And so that's
I'm
what
like,
I do.
You mean you don't have to learn? It doesn't always have to be through like pain and sweat and blood and tears and like, oh, great, I'm in another learning opportunity. I'm like, you can learn from pleasure, because I got to tell you, I'm struggling. I'm going to be really vulnerable. We try to be really vulnerable and authentic here, and I mean in life, but here, and I'm struggling. I'm in my 50s and I'm not happy with, even though I'm working out again, I'm not happy with this upper stuff I'm carrying. And I know part of it is because sometimes I reward myself with sugar. And so I've got, I would love to talk to you about how do you reward yourself during the day? What's pleasure? I don't like getting mani-pedis. I don't do bubble baths. Can you please give me some options? Because I'm not a bubble bath kind of person. And it drives me crazy when like, oh, just get a mani-pedi. That doesn't relax me. It's like my feet are tender. I'm a jogger.
I'm always so afraid when someone touches my feet that I'm going to laugh and then fart. And
yes,
and I mean, that's just the truth of the matter. I've had like maybe 2 pedicures in my life for that reason.
I'm so glad I'm not alone. So yeah, Kerri, lots to work with here. Hello.
Yes. Hello. Let's go. Let's dive right in.
Let's just dive right in.
Well, and the other thing too, when to add to that, so when Kerri and I spoke, the other thing was that how this came to be for you. The awareness that you have, because you've got an incredible story behind it. And oftentimes, when you're dealing with what your life's calling is or what your journey is going to be, we had a guest on a few weeks ago who said, yeah, I wanted all my life to work with minerals. That's what it was. And yet that's her calling and that's what she's doing. And so sometimes you are called to do something. So Kerri, saying a little bit about that too, as we lead into some more practical how-tos.
Yeah. Well, what
no pressure. Go.
Yeah. Well, in regards to what I'm doing now, it's that what I'm doing now chose me. This wasn't like a thing that I grew up and I was like, I think I want to work with pleasure and intimacy. Like that just wasn't even on the radar. I didn't even know that existed. And so I had if we talk about sort of 8-10 years ago, I had a really normal, regular life. I mean, I went to school. I had the good job. I used to work in HR. That's hilarious now that I'm doing this. I had the man and bought a house. It's just like I checked all the boxes. I was like, check, check, check. And based on sort of my own upbringing and sort of the instability there and, not having my dad around, and we moved around a lot, and I was like almost helped raise my brothers. It's like I wanted sort of this, everything that we thought we should have. It's like I didn't have that growing up. So I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to go and get that. And so I checked all the boxes, and then I got there, and then I was like, oh yeah, this isn't really what I thought it was or that I wanted at all. I was like, okay, I spent like 28 years of my life getting all this, and I got it, and I was like, oh, it just felt sort of flat, like sort of meh. Like, and my life wasn't terrible. I wasn't married to a terrible man. He was a good guy. He still is a good guy. But it was just sort of like, this is it. This is it. And when I had that realization, well, first I fought it for a while. I was like, this can't be. No. And my body kept telling me, like, I knew I had to leave. I had to leave. And so one day I did. And I was like, I can't be married anymore. I can't do it. It's just like everything, my bones, I could feel it in my chest, something pulling me of like, get out. And so, I always say we always have choice, but almost in that moment, it felt like I didn't have choice. Like it was so strong. And so I left my marriage, excruciating, painful. It hurts to hurt people. And to choose yourself can be really painful sometimes. And so I had this naive sort of idea of like, okay, eat, pray, love journey. Here we go, sort of thing. And then 3 weeks later, I get a phone call, and my youngest brother, who I was very close with, died by suicide when he was 17.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And so it was just like, the foundation of everything, my whole life was just like, oh, wow, I was going one direction, and now it's like, where am I going? Well, who am I? What do I know? Like everything was just sort of gone. And I was fortunate to have done some spiritual work that I was like, okay, something's trying to get my attention. I know that much. And I really got to start to look at what's going on here. And so I did a lot of healing over the next year. And then I packed up and left. I live in Calgary, Alberta. I'm Canadian. And I was like, got everything down to 2 suitcases. And I was like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to Australia, and I'm going to travel around Asia for a bit. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just like kind of in this sort of unknown place. I'm like, hey, I kind of have these couple places that I'm going to go, and I'll figure it out. And I spent 3 months living in Thailand, and I was going to do yoga. And then I get to this place, and it's a tantric community. And I was like, oh, okay, I came for yoga, and I'm seeing all these women with like flowy dresses and showing their stomachs. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm never going to do that. I was like, I'm not showing my stomach. And I'm just like in Thailand, like really warm out. And I'm like in long sleeves and pants, and I'm just like tightening my body. I'm just like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. And I was like terrified. I was just like, had so much body issues. Didn't even know what this tantra thing was, but I see all these really free-flowing sort of women. I'm just like, oh. And I was like, well, you know what? When in Rome, like, what else? What else do I have? I'm not going back to my old life. I don't know I was like, I'm here. Let's go. Totally when in Rome. And that is what totally changed my life. Like if I think about, learning about, oh God, the power of sexual energy. I never thought of my sexual energy. I never thought about my own sexual needs. I never thought about pleasure. Sex was always something that I enjoyed, but my own pleasure was never on the table. It was just like a way to sort of take care of my man sort of thing. I enjoyed it, and it was regular, but it was just my own sort of fullness and pleasure just wasn't, I never thought about it. And, learning about like the feminine and how the feminine itself is divine. It was just like, oh, wow, this is this is great. This is a powerful thing to like be a woman and everything that comes from that. And I was like, whoa, it was like a whole new world. And it was a game changer. And I remember being in this one kind of ritual and I was doing my goddess pose and we went to a meditation after and I was like, this is why everything happened. Like my whole life fell apart for me to get here and I had to learn this. This is why.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, I guess this is where I've been brought to. So here we go.
Wow.
Yeah. And it changed my life. And yeah. And just having to offering that to other women. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story. And I would love to just add a little bit. So I, growing up, body issues, molested, assaulted, eating disorders. I've done a lot of work, but I know that there's always more room for that. There's more. And so I was invited to this Tantric Weekend in Philadelphia. And it was all these women who had done the Mama Gina work. I was the only one who hadn't. And then we had our teacher who was like a lioness. Like she kind of scared me a little bit. And, but I'm showing up, I'm doing the work. I'm feeling a little bit like an outsider, but I'm like, don't hold yourself back. Don't let yourself do that, Elaine. One of the ways we can separate ourselves. And anyway, so like I'm getting through it on Saturday. I'm like, I don't, I'm in the middle of it. And then I come back after the break and I have like a breakthrough and a part of me is like, okay, I'm good. I've been uncomfortable. I've had my breakthrough. Are we done? Like I was kind of, and then the teacher's like, okay, and now for our Saturday night ritual, we're all going to dance in the circle and strip down to our nakedness. And the other women are going to throw rose petals and go, which is like, anyway. And I was like, I'm leaving, like in my head, I'm like, how can I get out of here? And I've like danced naked in front of people, I've done all kinds of like be free anyway, but this was different. It was so much more intimate. And a part of me was just like, it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever been a part of. And I saw the divine in the feminine body. And we're talking a 60-year-old lady, a 70-year-old lady, an 80-year-old lady. I stripped down. I did not get fully naked. I got halfway naked, but it was beautiful. And it was like nothing I'd ever done. And I remember just like really appreciating curves for the first time. In the 80s, my curves were bad. I was trying to fit myself into this box that I knew I would never be able to fit into. But God, I tried with laxatives and drugs and sex and, and I think people can relate to that. Like I'm curvy. Even when I was on crystal meth, I was curvy, which is kind of funny and kind of sad. But anyway, so I have no idea if, I'm still a baby in the Tantra world, but it was an amazing experience and I can't wait to do more at some point,
Yeah, I've had similar experiences like that. And that was part of what was such a game changer for me. It's just, I had so many body issues, and to have men and women just look at you like the goddess. It's like, look at your hips and look at all this, like, it's like seeing like you as the goddess, you as the divine feminine in this manifestation, and then them revering you. And that's part of sort of that path, like they say Tantra is a path of ecstasy. So like going through the realm of joy and ecstasy and like starting to, instead of like accepting or being okay with my body, it's like, no, like revering it. Look at my hips and look at the way my body curves and moves and my legs and my like, and it's just like, it's like, that's the part where it's like, that's so enlivening and liberating when it's like starting to totally shift the view of like, this is a manifestation of like the feminine. And I've also had an experience of being naked and I had huge body issues. Like I have a birthmark that covers my whole left arm. I don't know if you can see it. And so my whole life, it was like t-shirts on at the pool. I would wear long sleeves in gym class. Like, no, I would like want to have sex with like the lights on when I first started having sex. Like it was like walking out of the room naked because I had like birthmarks on my bump. Like I was just like like more everything. I was so tight and constricted in my body. And so I do this workshop similar to what you did. And it's like a whole group of women. And there's a big group of us. And we go out into little pods of like 3 of us. And we undress naked in front of each other. And we say for 1 minute what we don't like about our body. And I was like, this, it's like, and I'm shaking, right? Like, I'm like, I have never done this. Oh my God. And there's other women around and there's like, and I sort of point out my arm and I point out the things that I don't like. I have these stretch marks and, my stomach, my bum, whatever. And then the women for 3 minutes then had to say everything that they loved about my body. Oh, and it was just like looking at my arm, they're like, yeah, I notice it. And it was like, it took the charge out of it. And I was like I was so freed in that moment. And it's like, and then them complimenting my body. It's like, I love the way like your hips are and like you have great legs and you have and I was just like, oh, like that. And it's like, it has liberated me and freed me ever since. And I'm just like, yeah. And I'm just like in a moment. And it's like, that's like, can we go through that realm instead of like just looking at the shit and getting over it? It's like, can we start to look at the beauty and the love and the revere what's there? It's like, that's where the real transformation can happen. So that changed the way I viewed my body. I was like, oh my God, I've been carrying this around for like 30 years, like hating myself. And then it's just like, oh, it's like all of a sudden just seeing the beauty of it all. And having women loving each other and complimenting each other, it's just like, oh, it was just like so heart opening.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I just keep thinking about how, here in the States, it's this or that. There's the age old sort of Madonna whore kind of thing that rattles in the background. And it's been a way of not letting us be who we are. I think that's just when you're thinking about who you are as a person in your core, not really tapping into that and having issues around it, as I do. It really does make a difference because it's sort of denying a part of who you really are. And that to understand that it falls on an entire spectrum. I like spectrums and ranges because it isn't this or that. This is my journey here, And so Elaine, when you were in that class, it pushed you a little bit because it was like, oh, I'm not going that far. And you didn't have to. And nobody pressured you to do that. They allowed you to just be who you were. We get to be who we are. And it also speaks to why it's so important to be able to either work one-on-one with somebody to sort of get that kind of coaching to get you more comfortable, then work in a smaller group, or maybe I'm prescribing this for myself. This might be how I do that, right? Because there is a part of me that would be like, oh yeah, I'm going to stand in a whole group of people and do whatever. But I do remember years ago, we went to Martha's Vineyard, and there was a nude beach there on Gay Head, and there was all this clay around. And I was like, oh my God. And it was the first time I ever sunbathed nude. And of course, look at me. I'm sun poisoning just waiting to happen. And so I'd slathered myself with everything. And then I see this guy walking down the beach and he's wearing a hat. And I'm like, why are you wearing a hat? Like, you're naked. Do you need a hat? And I just remember the whole experience was just so odd. But at the same time, there was something very freeing about lathering yourself in the clay and then washing it off and how that felt. And how much we don't give ourselves permission or even have societal permission to do these sorts of things, right? We don't even have that much vocabulary. It's even hard to say the words out loud.
Wow.
Pleasure.
There's a lot of shame around pleasure, big time. It's like, who are you to have that? Or, there's this view of it, like what you're talking, Kathy, you're talking about the Madonna whore complex. It's like, well, if you do that, then you're this. And it's like, that's actually not true. It's like, especially as women, it's like, there's a full spectrum of femininity and we have it all. Like, that's the nature of feminine. We're everything. So it's like we're the Madonna and we're the whore and we're the mother and we're the, Kali that can chop your head off, and we're so nurturing and we're so like all this kind of stuff. We're all of it. And so when we start to go label people as that, then it's like we really narrow really who we are, and we're not in the fullness of who we are or in our own wholeness. And I find that, it is really challenging to sort of step into sort of owning that pleasure and owning that part of you because of societal and what things, and it's shameful, but it's also a part of who we are as women. And
right.
And it's like starting to embrace the fullness and that full spectrum of who we are as women. It's like we have all of it. We're everything. And it's like, yes, we have our own natural flavor of femininity, but it's like we also want to expand that spectrum to expand into the wholeness of who we are.
Right.
But there's a lot of society, especially in North America. I'm in Canada, and it's almost like the same thing. It's just sort of this. It's very easy to feel judged or criticized or labeled as something or be viewed in a certain way, when really that's such a beautiful part of who we are. And it can just add to sort of our own fullness.
It's so interesting. When I think of forgive me, but this is really the only Tantra experience I've had is this particular weekend. And at one point we all got to act out. Some of us got to be the Madonna. Some people got to be the whore. And then there was the women who keep the patriarchy in place, the place, I forget the right term.
Tisk.
Yeah. And, I had, of course, everyone had the most fun dancing like a whore. That was fun. But I had fun pretending to be a virgin because it's been so long. But, when I think about moments of shame in my past that really it was from other women. It was from other women. And I used to talk about being in the restroom, at an event, at the theater or whatever. And if you were the prettiest one, feeling the daggers of judgment and hatred, but also being the one who was throwing the daggers because I didn't feel enough, and it's so hard to explain this to a man, but, being in a women's restroom or changing room or locker room is like being in a football game in some ways,
The competition historically has been for men, and I apologize for any others who fall in different ranges, but that was kind of the overarching thing. And so when you're competing for that, there's not enough, right? There's not enough. And if there's not enough, then you're my competition.
And now I love it. It's like, you know what? You can have the caveman. I think I'm going to hang out with the other cave women, or I really enjoy my own company. Do we really need to fight over the cavemen at this point? I don't know. But I just feel like, and hurt people are the people who hurt other people, right? And so, the people who shame have probably been shamed themselves, I imagine. I haven't studied it the way Brene Brown has, but I just love this thinking of the whole being and, giving ourselves permission to be bigger than a size 4.
Yes. And exactly. And embrace, just looking at our bodies differently, but also just viewing even the feminine and being able to appreciate other women and where sort of what their flavor is. And when they expand into their own spectrum, it's really with the feminine, it's there's always more. This whole idea of limited or narrow, it's actually not valid or true. If Elaine steps into, or Kathy steps into her whole, her full spectrum femininity or her sensuality, it's that doesn't affect me and mine at all. If anything, it gives me sort of permission to also do the same. It's oh, wow, I'd like some of that. But this idea of trying to keep each other small, I think is a very old idea. And I think it doesn't serve. And I think it's coming from a place of a really immature feminine. And when we can embrace and own sort of that, our full spectrum of who we are and our sensuality and our place of innocence and our, all these different kind of archetypes or things. It's just, that aliveness. And it just gives us it's like we want other women to experience that too. And so we can come from a more of a mature place rather than like, oh, that threatens me, or she's being more sensual. And it's like, I want to put a stop to that. It's like, oh no, let's flip this around. It's showing you the potential that you also have.
Right. Your own development. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great. And so the way you work with people, I see on your website, you have workshops that you do. Say a little bit more about how you work with people.
So I have workshops with women, and then I have couples, and then so with the women workshops, I have a Love Your Body workshop, because as we were talking, I mean, that's a key area that every woman has, and you know, yeah. Yes.
For those of you who are listening, we started by raising hands and then feet. There are no more visible limbs to raise. We're all in.
We're all in, and you can still have body issues without having weight issues. Like this body issues come with a whole bag of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I work with women with their sort of that body love, getting to a place of like radical self-love beyond just like accepting your body, because accepting is just sort of like, okay, I accepted it, but really like, wow, like loving, it's like loving yourself. It's like, wow, I do like my hips, and I do like this, and complimenting other women. And it's such a beautiful, it's a heavy day, but when afterwards, it's just like the connection and the closeness and sort of the shifts of like people sort of seeing their body in a whole other light. It's like, okay, that's it. And I also have a Awakening the Seductress workshop. So getting more in touch with that sensual aspect. Yes. And I think something that people don't, because when I say seductress, or it's like we augment, or many people go into like negative, like really manipulative and like taking a man, like all this kind of stuff. But really, when we start to ignite that energy within us, our sensuality, our pleasure, our sexual energy, it's like we become so radiant and magnetic. And it's about getting to a place where it's like there's no getting anything. It's like being a magnet for it. It's like people, it's like the enchantress archetype. Like when we see a woman in the woods and all these animals just come to her, it's like that energy. Like that's part of sort of awakening this sensual, seductive part of ourselves. It's like we become magnets for what we desire. So there's no struggle, getting, having, doing.
Like pick me, see me.
Pick me. Yeah, me here. Like this, like, yeah, finding, like, thinking that there's only one thing and pushing everyone else out of the way. It's like, no, we can all sort of have it all. So that's really important. And then I do a lot of work with couples on like reigniting like the spark. So sometimes when we've been in a relationship for a long time and it's like we're together all the time and things are sort of same and different, it's like how do we get back to like wanting to like, yeah, that like spark where it's like, ooh, I can feel that desire. It's like, ooh, I want to like play and touch and and it's like that's actually can be quite an easy thing to create, but it's quite counterintuitive to what we think. So like also looking at masculine and feminine dynamics, igniting sexual energy, and starting to overcome, all of these encompass overcoming sexual shame, because there's always going to be some resistance, because we all have shame around sexuality. It's in the collective. It's just a big thing. So we start to overcome, and it's a beautiful thing to see a group of people come together for the same intention. And it's just like the feeling of closeness, like when you've shared such intimate things or witnessed and have been witnessed sort of moving through vulnerability. It's like the closeness that feels. I remember finishing a workshop and one guy was like, it feels like a family. And I was like, yeah, like the connection and the closeness and the intimacy that is fostered is just like, this, we needed it before COVID. And then now with COVID, it's like, now we really need it. So yeah.
More than ever before.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And it's fart. It's fart. Oh my God. I can't believe I just said that. Instead of saying it's part, I said it's fart. It is part of, I know, I'm obsessed. It's part of our full expression. And that's also going to mean that it's healthy for everything in our body.
Yes. And they talk about this in yoga therapy, is that when we have a healthy sexual desire, that's a sign of good overall health. like when we're in a healthy state and we're putting good things in our bodies and there's an abundance of energy. It's like we have a sexual desire. So that's actually a good thing for like holistically for our whole body and all aspects of our life. It shows that we're sort of in a good place. We're in a really healthy, abundant place in our life. And so it's a very good thing. Yeah, definitely.
I love it. And so, Kerri, if somebody, obviously, we're going to have your website in the notes and stuff so people can come learn more about you. But if somebody was just like, okay, I want to put more pleasure in my daily life, what would you suggest?
So what I would first say is that pleasure is an aliveness and a fullness in your body. That's the definition.
An aliveness and a fullness in your body.
In your body.
And so there's a full spectrum of pleasure. So sometimes when you think of pleasure, people think sexual pleasure. It's like, okay, that's a part of it. And that's a great part of it. It's like, and there's a lot of things that bring me pleasure. So when I have a really rich deep conversation with like a girlfriend and I feel that connection and I feel alive and I feel full, it's like, that's pleasure. And so starting to pay attention to your body of what gives you that aliveness and that fullness in your body. Some people, it might be a bubble bath. Some people, it might be movement, but it's like starting to pay attention of like, if you look back, like, okay, what has made me feel that aliveness and that fullness in my life? So it could be going out in nature. It could be doing a certain type of work. It could be, for women, movement is a big thing. It's starting to pay attention to how your body responds in that way. And it's like, how can we start to do more of that? So,
okay.
So bubble baths aren't your thing. And oftentimes like wine, chocolate bubble baths, like those can be band-aids to certain things. But it's like really starting to look at what gives you that aliveness and that fullness in your body. And it's like, okay, how can I do more of that? And so for me, a movement really helps. It just to get, because sometimes, especially with women, we can carry a lot of energy in our lower bodies. And when we're really stagnant, it can just feel a bit heavy. And so when we can start to move, and this doesn't, I think I posted on my Instagram, I was dancing to like Mariah Carey Emotions, because it's like, so this doesn't have to be, this can be a really fun, light thing. And it's just like, I started to feel, it's like, oh, I felt so good in my body. I felt like full and I felt free and I felt playful. I felt fun. It's like, that gave me my aliveness and my fullness. And it's like, okay, I need to be doing more of that. I need to incorporate that as a practice because that makes me feel really good. It makes me feel really good to like go for a coffee with a girlfriend and just be able to sort of talk about whatever and know that there's no judgment. And I can sort of put anything out on the table and they're like, okay, well, we've heard it all before, sort of thing. And it's like looking at that. So that's something to introduce as a practice. And for a movement for women is really important again, because it gets that energy moving. It's like, okay, we could start to, it's like when we do that, it's like we feel joy, but we carry that throughout the day. And it's like, wow, okay, well, let's keep this going. What are some choices that I could make that give me this aliveness and this fullness? Can I say no to things that's like, I really don't want to have lunch with that person? So it's like, yeah, I really want to go and explore this or do this one activity. And it's like starting to pay attention to that, what brings us pleasure. And it's like, okay, let's start doing more of that, saying yes to that and saying no to the other things that maybe are no for us.
I love that. Like it's 2:20. Dance break.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, I noticed I was on my spin bike yesterday morning before I started a long day. And I remember feeling like, oh, I feel so good. I felt so good, because I had sweated and moved my body. And it's just such a good feeling. I love it so much.
Yeah. And it's
then
like
you're
energetic. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and energetically, it's like if you know the chakras, it's like that heavy lower energy, you start to move it up. And it has like, there's a lighter, more joy to it. And it's not sort of so heavy. So it's like energetically, it's doing something to our body and our level of consciousness. So it's like, might be seem fun and playful, but it's like, there's something really happening on a deeper level as well when we do that.
And when you're doing that, those are moments of mindfulness. So for people who are looking to bring more mindfulness to their lives, it's as easy as that. It's just being aware. when you're exercising or when you're walking around, how that feels. I love doing Tai Chi because for me, it's like swimming on land. Because one of the places I feel most elegant is when I'm swimming, so in the water, but I don't have much of a chance to do that. But Tai Chi reminds me of that. It's just a very elegant, and it makes you practice, and it makes you feel like you're swimming. And it's one of the few moments that I actually do feel a sense of elegance as I move. And so to just really be in that and appreciate that, but that awareness adds to, it's additive to your life, being able to have that sense of mindfulness.
Yeah. And feeling, it's like, what feeling does that give you? And it's like, well, what other things can I choose to do that brings me more of that feeling? So if there's a feeling of elegance, it's like, wow, how could I do this? Or what else could I do that brings me that feeling? And so we start to sort of amplify that and resonate more on that feeling and making choices around like inviting more of that in. So it's just like little tiny things. And I think the subtle does not get the credit it deserves when we start to make those little changes of like even like walking through a grocery store. Is there a way that when I'm doing Tai Chi and how I'm moving, how I'm feeling, can I bring that into how I walk through the grocery store? It's like, those are really big things. It seems so small and, sometimes we don't really think about it, but it's like that really starts to have an impact. It's like, wow, I can feel like this in like all areas of my life, or I can feel like this way more. And it's like, starts to amplify that. So, yeah.
And your game-changing moment came in a moment of subtlety, right? So you had yourself open to, let me just experience this. I'm a social scientist. I'm going to try this. Oops, this isn't yoga. Okay, well, let's see what this is. And so that those aha moments, they really are, they're, Elaine and I always talk about how do you make breathing sexy? Because the fact is the breath is our source of life. And it feels like you're not doing anything. But if you're breathing fully into your belly, you're basically telling your body that everything's okay. If you're not fully breathing, your body isn't sure and it's waiting for instructions. And so it's these simple movements. And I actually do that in my kitchen. I use my Tai Chi to move around in my small kitchen. And it feels like I'm graceful in my kitchen. And it's kind of, you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at me, but it's what I feel.
Yes, exactly. And that's what's so important it's such a, like, just the subtlety of like doing little things like that and inviting that in, and little things like that can really start to shift things. And so, it's the subtlety. We can start to do little subtle things and start to shift our perspective.
I love it. I love this work. I feel like we do have so much collective shame around sex. It's just in bodies, and it's just crazy.
And the truth is, like, every time I've been in facilitated an exercise or been in it myself, it's just like, naked women are beautiful. They're so beautiful. Like, you see every woman just sort of in her body, and it's just like, it's just like getting a chance to like revere the feminine. And it's like the full spectrum of like what the feminine is and how we're all manifestations of different aspects of that. And it's just the beauty is like.
So I was just going to say, sorry, Kathy. I remember being at the Y and seeing the old ladies changing into their swimsuits, right? And being horrified and terrified of old bodies. This is 20 years ago. And, that was all my judgment and my conditioning and my fear about myself, right? Projecting onto them. Is that my future? Oh my God. Like, what is the body doing? And she looks great, but she looks, whatever. But I have to say, when I was doing the Tantra thing and we were in the circle in that sacred space, there was one woman who had like folds, I guess, folds of fat or skin or, but it was beautiful. So it just makes me think, where is my perspective? Like, how else have I been conditioned, and how can I unlearn some of this stuff, So definitely You're in my future, Kerri, for sure.
Well, when we used to be able to travel, I remember making it my business to look at the Three Graces. Where was that painting? Is it in the Prado? I think it might be. But because if you look at the way women were painted back in the way olden days, they looked a lot different from how they look today. They weren't twiggy. So the Three Graces, and there's this Bill Bryson quote that I just really love, and it is about the miracle in life, and it says, "Not one of your pertinent ancestors was squashed, devoured, drowned, starved, stranded, stuck fast, untimely wounded, or otherwise deflected from its life's quest of delivering a tiny charge of genetic material to the right partner at the right moment in order to perpetuate the only possible sequence of hereditary combinations that could result eventually, astoundingly, and all too briefly, in you."
Wow. I love him.
Yeah. That is, and sometimes we need those reminders of just like, I was genetically like our being here is like 1 in a trillion or something. It's some ridiculous number. And it's like, and it's like made to have this body and to be feminine and to have it's just like seen as divine. It's like this body is divine, and me as being a woman and my femininity. And it's just, oh, that's such a beautiful quote. And it's just, and I remember looking at, in the Louvre in Paris and seeing all these sculptures of women. And it's just like, yeah, and they're beautiful. They're so beautiful. And it's just like the power. And, I think this is what Tantra really shifted in me. It's just like, I was so like hated my curves. I always wanted to be thinner or all this stuff. And it's like, really, it's like that shows like the power, the amount of potential and life force that you have in your body. It's like, in Tantra communities, it's like, the bigger the curves, the better. Because they're just like, wow, this powerful woman with all this energy. And it's like, I'm like, can you multiply yourselves and women like come out and move to North America? Because it's just like, oh, what that did was just like, just shifted
so
everything.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I was just moved. My mentor read this poem to me, and then I just started working with a photographer because I'm getting some new headshots done. So of course it's bringing up all of my stuff, but this poem, I just love it so much. And I was just moved to pull it off my bulletin board. "The time will come when with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, 'Sit here, eat.' You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart into itself to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit, feast on your life." And that is by Derek Walcott.
Oh, beautiful poet.
That's beautiful.
Gorgeous. I have goosebumps.
So
yeah,
I have goosebumps. So on that note, Kerri, thank you so much for helping me. I already feel more alive and in my body. I have goosebumps. I'm just, I think your work is so important. It's so healing and it's essential.
Mm-hmm.
It's essential because we're all human, and with this high-tech Zoom world, which I'm so grateful for, but we need our humanity now more than ever, So if people want to know more about you, how do they find you?
So they can go to my website. So it's Kerri Cust, KerriCust.com. And I have a free call with people. So if you're looking to get that spark back for yourself or your relationship, I have a free call so you can connect with me and we can see what we can do together.
Oh, that's awesome. Wonderful. That's
awesome,
so great.
Awesome. And I just want to say, if you are somebody who, if the word work, WORK, feels like another 4-letter word, but you should reach out to Kathy Keegan. because she is a masterful coach. She coached me off the ledge yesterday. She is constantly reading about 16 books at a time. I've never known someone who loves learning and studying humanity and potential and human transformation. And every time I talk to her, I feel like I get smarter. But she's also has this kind, amazing heart. So if you feel like you're stuck in the area of work, whether you're at a business or working from home or want to start your own, or if you work for yourself and your boss is kind of an asshole, which I fall in that category sometimes, talk to Kathy Keegan, and her website is KATHYKEEGAN. And that is the best way to find her, correct?
That is. Oh my gosh, you are so right. And thank you so much. And Elaine, I just have to say, if you have the opportunity to work with Elaine to learn how to be on camera, to learn how to really deeply dive into your story, and to really feel like you're in the presence of someone who gets you, sees you, understands you, and uplifts you, you want to be in touch with Elaine, which is elaine@captivatethecrowd.com. Should I spell Captivate the Crowd? No. Captivate the Crowd. Look it up.
With C's.
And it's .com, not .gum, with deference to our current president, who had a little trouble announcing a website the other day. He kept saying it's just that stutter thing, right? And it comes out in these strange ways. So it was adorable.
We all have weird things. So yes, thank you. And I do, monthly webinars and master classes. I'm doing a challenge at the end of May. So if anybody knows you need help with video, and come play. So thank you so much, Kerri.
Thank you so much.
Grateful.
I had such a good conversation with you both.
It was really
Kerri, this was just wonderful. And thanks everybody for listening. And we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. And or maybe us hearing you or you hearing us. It's
connecting somehow. And
I think what I'm trying to say is, yes, stay safe and see you next time.
Be healthy. Bye.